ever find yourself driving down a lonely highway at night, where the silence feels too heavy? That's where Daniel Hayes, a 32-year-old sales rep, found himself one night, and trust me, after what happened, you might never want to drive alone again. So before we get into it, hit that subscribe button if you love true horror stories like this one, because this one's gonna crawl under your skin. The loneliness. Daniel was driving home from a business trip, somewhere between two small desert towns in Nevada. It was close to midnight, that dead hour when even the air feels still. The road stretched on endlessly. No streetlights, no cars, not even a flicker on the horizon. Just the faint hum of his car engine and the rhythmic thump of tires against cracked asphalt. His phone had no signal. The radio was static, and the only light came from his high beams cutting through the dark. He hadn't seen another vehicle for at least 40 minutes. The sky was swallowed by thick gray clouds. Not a single star in sight. And you know that feeling when you realize you're truly alone out there? That's when Daniel started feeling it. That gnawing unease. That quiet thought, what if something happens here? The figure appears. Then something caught his eye. A faint shape, standing near the shoulder of the road. At first, he thought it was a signpost. But as he got closer, the shape grew clearer. It was a man. He was standing perfectly still, facing the open desert, not the road. His coat flapped slightly in the wind, long and gray, the kind that looks almost colorless under headlights. Daniel instinctively slowed down. His hands tightened on the wheel. The man didn't move, didn't react. He wasn't hitchhiking, wasn't signaling for help. Just standing there. The closer Daniel got, the more wrong it felt. The man's posture was too rigid, like he'd been standing that way for hours. Daniel decided not to stop. As he drove past, he could feel his pulse in his throat. But then, in his rearview mirror, he saw it. The man's head had turned, and he was staring right at him. Two pale, almost glowing eyes, catching the light just enough to be unmistakable. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. He pressed harder on the gas and tried to shake it off. Just a guy, he told himself. Maybe he's drunk, maybe lost. But something deep down whispered, no, that wasn't right. The unexplainable. About 10 minutes later, Daniel noticed his fuel gauge was dipping dangerously low. His GPS hadn't updated in an hour, but the map had shown a gas station about 15 miles ahead. He sighed in frustration and glanced back at the dark horizon in his mirror, and froze. Someone was walking along the shoulder. Far behind. He squinted, the gray coat. That same shape. The same slow, uneven gait. But how? He'd been driving nonstop for 10 minutes at 60 miles an hour. There's no way anyone could have kept up. Daniel blinked hard. No, he muttered. It can't be him. He pressed the accelerator, trying to convince himself his eyes were playing tricks. When he looked again, the man was gone. The highway stretched empty once more. But now the silence felt different. He wasn't just alone, he was being watched. The footsteps. A few miles later, the gas light began to flash. His car sputtered, then rolled to a stop. Daniel coasted to the shoulder, the engine coughing its last breath. He sat there in the dark, listening to the wind rattle through the desert. No cell service. No houses. Just the black void outside his windows. He decided to stay put until sunrise. It felt safer inside the car. Minutes passed. Maybe 20. He reclined the seat, trying to rest his eyes. That's when he heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps. Slow, steady, deliberate on the gravel behind his car. Daniel's blood ran cold. He sat perfectly still, every nerve on fire. The sound grew closer. He dared to look into the rearview mirror and nearly screamed. There he was, the same man in the gray coat, standing just a few feet from the back of his car. His face pale and expressionless. His mouth slightly open as if whispering something Daniel couldn't hear. Please, Daniel whispered. Please go away. The man tilted his head slowly to one side, like an animal trying to understand him. Then he moved, one step closer. Daniel's shaking hands grabbed the door lock. Click. The man reached out, long fingers brushing the rear glass, leaving faint streaks as he dragged them slowly across. Daniel ducked low in his seat, his heart pounding in his ears. He could hear the man's breathing now, shallow, raspy, like someone who hadn't slept in years. Then came the sound of footsteps again, this time moving toward the driver's side. The escape. Daniel's shaking fingers found the keys. He twisted the ignition. The car coughed, sputtered, then miraculously roared to life. He slammed his foot down. Gravel sprayed. The tires squealed. As the car lurched forward, his headlights caught one final glimpse in the mirror. The man in the road, turning his head slowly as Daniel sped away, watching him disappear into the distance. Daniel didn't stop driving for 20 straight minutes. He didn't care if the tank ran dry. But somehow, it didn't. He reached a gas station, pale, sweating, out of breath. The lights looked heavenly against the night. The eerie reveal. As the attendant began filling his tank, Daniel stepped out to catch his breath. His legs were trembling. Trying to calm himself, he grabbed a cloth from the pump and started cleaning his windshield. Then he noticed something that made him drop the rag. On the back window, 5 long smudges, faint but clear. Fingerprints, burned into the glass like they'd been pressed there by something not entirely human. He stared at them for a long time, the gas station lights flickering faintly above him. He never took that route again. If you made it this far, and your lights are still on, hit subscribe right now, because the next story is darker. And if you think this one was unsettling, wait until you hear who followed someone home. Have you ever driven through an empty highway at night? Rain hammering the windshield, wipers barely keeping up, and realized you're the only person out there? That eerie quiet where even your own breathing feels too loud? That's the kind of night Rebecca Nolan, a 27-year-old college student, was having. And what followed might make you glance at your rearview mirror a little differently tonight. If you're new here, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss stories like this. You'll see why. The isolation. Rebecca was heading back to her campus after spending the weekend with her parents. Her drive cut through the Appalachian foothills, a maze of winding roads, dark trees, and old mining towns that hadn't seen a living soul in decades. The rain started as a drizzle. Then it turned violent, sheets of water hammering her windshield until she could barely see the yellow lines. Her headlights illuminated nothing but the narrow stretch of road ahead. No streetlights, no houses, just the black blur of forest on both sides. Her phone showed no signal. The storm had swallowed the world whole. Rebecca adjusted her grip on the steering wheel and told herself she'd be fine. "It's just another drive," she whispered. "Just a couple more hours." Then, in her rearview mirror, a pair of headlights appeared. A black sedan, distant at first, but slowly closing the gap. The car that wouldn't pass. At first, she felt relief. Finally, another driver out here. But that feeling didn't last. She noticed the car wasn't trying to pass. It just stayed there, perfectly centered behind her. When she slowed down, it slowed down. When she sped up, it matched her. "Okay," she murmured nervously, glancing at the mirror. "That's weird." She flipped her blinker and switched lanes. Maybe they wanted to get by. But the sedan moved too, smoothly, effortlessly, right behind her again. Her heart began to race. Maybe it was just someone nervous about driving in the rain. Maybe they didn't want to overtake in low visibility. But deep down, something about its timing, the precision, felt too deliberate. Almost like the driver was waiting for her to make the next move. The storm worsens. The rain grew heavier, slamming the roof of her car like 1,000 fingertips. The wipers squealed, fighting to keep up. And that's when her dashboard lights began to flicker. Her radio cut out. The headlights dimmed for a moment, then came back. Her car was losing power. Rebecca's stomach dropped. "Not now," she whispered, slapping the steering wheel. The black sedan's headlights glared behind her, blindingly bright now, reflecting off the wet road. She signaled and coasted to the shoulder. The sedan didn't pass. It slowed too, stopping exactly 20 feet behind her. Rebecca froze. She waited, staring at her mirror. No door opened. No movement. The rain hammered down harder, drowning every other sound. The silence between. Rebecca's chest tightened as seconds stretched into minutes. Her breath fogged the glass. She kept telling herself, someone will get out, ask if I'm okay. But no one did. The sedan just sat there. Headlights on. Engine running. What do you want? She whispered under her breath, feeling her pulse throb in her neck. She reached for her phone. Still no signal. Another minute passed. Then another. Her mind raced. What if they're waiting for me to step out? What if this isn't a person at all? She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, whispering, please just go. But the moment she started her engine, the sedan's headlights flared brighter. It was watching her. The chase. Rebecca floored the gas pedal. Her tires skidded across the slick asphalt before gripping again. The black sedan followed instantly. She pushed to 60, 70, 80, swerving to avoid puddles. Her hands trembled against the wheel, knuckles white. Why are you following me? She screamed, though no one could hear her. The sedan stayed perfectly behind her. No drifting, no weaving, like it was glued to her tail. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, its headlights turned off. Total darkness behind her. Rebecca gasped and hit the brakes. The only light was from her own beams cutting through the rain. But the road behind her was empty. No sedan. No taillights. No movement. It was gone. Her stomach twisted. Either it had turned off somewhere, or it hadn't been there to begin with. The diner. Rebecca kept driving, faster now. Every second felt like an hour. The rain softened slightly, and through the blur ahead, she spotted a faint glow. A neon sign flickering. Open 24 hours. It was a roadside diner. She pulled in so fast her tires squealed. The bell above the door jingled violently as she stumbled inside, drenched and shaking. The old man behind the counter looked up, startled. You okay, miss? She could barely get the words out. Someone's following me. Black car. It's out there. The man frowned and peeked out the window. And there it was, at the far end of the parking lot. A black sedan, motionless, its engine still running. Rebecca felt her throat close. See it? She gasped. The cook nodded slowly, reaching for the phone. Don't worry. I'll call the sheriff. The wait. For 20 minutes, Rebecca sat in the diner booth, sipping coffee she couldn't taste. The rain had finally stopped. The black sedan didn't move. Every time she dared to look through the foggy window, it was still there, dark, silent, patient. The cook tried to calm her down. Maybe it's just some trucker resting. But she shook her head. It followed me. I swear it was right on me for miles. Then its lights went out. When the sheriff finally pulled into the lot, she nearly cried with relief. He was an older man, calm, steady. Ma'am, you said there's a black car out here? She nodded frantically and pointed. Right there. In the corner. But when they turned to look, the car was gone. The footage. Rebecca felt sick. Her hands trembled. It was right there. You saw it, didn't you? The sheriff looked at her kindly but suspiciously. Let's check the security cameras. Maybe we'll see where it went. They followed the cook to the small monitor behind the counter. He rewound the footage. The grainy black and white video showed the parking lot, the rain, the neon flicker. There was Rebecca's car pulling in fast, brakes screeching. But behind her, nothing. No headlights, no black sedan, no second vehicle at all. The sheriff frowned. Looks like you came alone, ma'am. Rebecca stared at the screen in disbelief. No, that's impossible. Her voice trembled. It was right there. It followed me all the way from Route 15. The cook crossed his arms. Maybe you were seeing things in the storm. Happens to folks around these parts more often than you'd think. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I know what I saw. The sheriff gave her a sympathetic nod. Maybe get some rest, miss. Long drives can play tricks on you. The twist. Rebecca left the diner an hour later, her clothes still damp, her nerves shot. The sheriff had offered to follow her back to the interstate, But when she turned the key in her ignition, her headlights flickered again. And from her rearview mirror, for just a split second, she saw them. Two faint lights, glowing far down the road, unmoving. She blinked and they were gone. Rebecca drove off without looking back once. To this day, she swears the black sedan wasn't human. And sometimes, when she drives that same stretch of highway at night, she still checks her mirror. Because sometimes, it's there. If you made it through this story, and you're still brave enough to keep your rearview mirror uncovered, hit subscribe right now. Because the next story, someone doesn't just follow you, they wait for you to stop. The night had settled heavy over Highway 19, that kind of dark that eats your headlights whole. Eric Morales had been driving for hours through the Colorado mountains, hauling tools and equipment for a construction site miles away. The road was narrow, winding, and completely empty. Then the engine coughed, once, twice, and died. The truck rolled to a stop beside the guardrail, the hum of the tires fading into silence. Eric muttered under his breath and tried the ignition again. Nothing. His CB radio was static, his phone down to 3%. The wind outside howled, pushing against the cab. He checked his map. The nearest town was miles away. But then, up ahead, a faint flicker, a glow cutting through the mist. Neon light. He grabbed his coat and started walking. Rising tension. Something's off. After 20 minutes of trudging through the cold, he saw it clearly. A sign buzzing weakly in the dark. Mountain View Motel. Half the letters were burnt out, the sign swaying slightly in the wind. The building looked abandoned, the paint peeling, most of the windows dark. Only one light glowed faintly behind the front desk. Eric hesitated, but the chill biting through his jacket convinced him otherwise. He stepped inside. The lobby smelled of old wood and dust. Behind the desk stood an older woman, maybe in her late 60s. Her smile came too quickly, stretching across her face like she'd been waiting all night just for him. "Evenin'," she said. "You're lucky. We don't get many travelers after dark." Eric tried to return the smile. "Truck broke down about a mile back. Just need a bed till morning." She nodded slowly, sliding a brass key across the counter. "Room 6, she said. "Right at the end of the hall." The key tag was cracked and old, but the number was freshly painted, almost too clean. As Eric walked to his room, the floor creaked beneath every step. The hallway lights flickered. A faint smell hung in the air, a mix of mold and something metallic. Middle, strange sounds. Room 6 looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Faded wallpaper, dusty curtains, a humming old air conditioner. Except one thing stood out. The mirror. It was huge, covering half the wall, and unlike the rest of the room it looked new. Gleaming, perfectly clear. He tossed his duffel bag on the bed, kicked off his boots and sat down. The silence pressed in around him. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping against the glass. He turned off the light and lay down. Minutes passed. Then, just as he started to drift, tap, tap, tap. Eric sat up. It wasn't the door. The sound came from inside the room. 3 soft knocks against the mirror. He froze, staring into the dark reflection. His bed was there, his bag, the lamp, but his reflection wasn't. For a second, he thought it was just the dim light. He rubbed his eyes and stood. The air felt colder near the mirror. Then he saw it faint behind him in the reflection. A shape, person, standing just a few feet away. He spun around, but the room was empty. The knocking stopped. Eric grabbed the lamp and flicked it on. The shape was gone, and his reflection was back. He didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Climax. The truth. By sunrise, the rain had stopped. Eric packed up quickly, desperate to leave. But when he tried the truck again, the engine still wouldn't start. As he slammed the hood shut, he spotted another traveler outside the motel. A man loading luggage into his car. Eric hurried over. "Hey, you stayed here last night too?" The man glanced up, pale and tired. "Yeah, room 7. Eric hesitated. "Did you?" hear anything strange?" The man's eyes flicked toward the motel. "You're in room 6, aren't you?" Eric nodded. The traveler went quiet, shifting uncomfortably. "They shut that room down last year," he said finally. "A guy, looked a lot like you, stayed there. They found him dead the next morning. Just sitting on the bed, staring into that mirror." Eric felt his throat tighten. "What happened to him?" The man shook his head. "No one knows. The clerk swore she locked the door after the cops left. Said no one's checked in there since." A chill ran through Eric's spine. He turned toward the office. The same woman was standing there, smiling again, motionless behind the glass door. He started toward her. "Ma'am," she interrupted softly. "You checked out already, remember?" He blinked. "What?" But when he turned back, the man he'd been talking to was gone. The car, too. The parking lot was completely empty. Ending the final moment. Eric didn't stop moving after that. He sprinted to his truck and turned the key, and somehow it roared to life on the first try. Gravel kicked up behind him as he sped out of the lot, tires screeching onto the highway. He didn't look back. Not until the motel was just a shadow in his rear view. The sky had lightened, streaks of orange breaking through the clouds. His breathing finally began to slow. But then, something caught his eye. In the side mirror, faint but visible, someone was sitting in the passenger seat. A man, still, silent, staring straight ahead. Eric looked over. The seat beside him was empty. When he looked back at the mirror, the figure smiled. And then it vanished.